China and the United States are the two countries with the most big cities in the world. In China, these are called urban agglomerations. In the US, they're called metropolitan areas. I'm going to refer to them all the way through today as cities. China had 171 cities over 750,000. United States had 67. But I'm going to focus more than on the size of the cities. I'm going to focus on more their integration and their dominance within what demographers and ecologists call the system of cities, or the urban hierarchy. Here is a map of China, and you can note the 171 big cities. The darker the identification, the larger the city. But another way of looking at it is with a satellite map, and this shows the cities exist by themselves. We can see Shanghai, we can see Beijing, Chongqing. I have a similar map for the United States. You might be wondering where Texas A&M is located. It's a very small city, 100,000 people. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the United States other than that one map. So those maps show that cities do exist by themselves. They're separate geographically. But in reality, they're not separate. They occupy a certain amount of space. Beijing is a certain amount of space. Shanghai a certain amount of space. But in reality, these cities are linked to one another in what's called an urban system. And it's that concept of the urban system that I'm going to focus on here today. In 2010, of the 30 largest cities in the world, 6 of them are in China. Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, you know this, Shenzhen, Chongqing, Wuhan. Shanghai was the 6th largest city in the whole world, surpassed only by Tokyo, Delhi, Mexico City, New York City, Sao Paulo. And actually, the point I'm going to make is that even though Shanghai is smaller than Delhi, is smaller than Mexico City, it's more dominant. So that's my major theme. Not focus on population size, focus on dominance and integration. So China had 171 cities, the largest of any country. US has 67, India 58, Brazil 26, Mexico 23, and all other countries had less than 20, and some countries had none. So China clearly stands out with 171. And the majority of China's people lives in cities. We learned earlier today about 54%. Yet this is in 2010, this was a population of 660 million people. So if the urban population of China was a single country, it would be the 2nd largest country in the world, only behind India. United Nations projects the urban population of China to be over 1 billion by the year 2050. Okay, let me set aside those issues and briefly here talk about Shanghai. I have a map, an old map of Shanghai, an old picture of Shanghai of the Bund that was developed by Great Britain. Shanghai was founded in the 11th century as a small fishing village near the mouth of the Yangtze River, but it was not until the 18th century that Shanghai began to grow, when it became the center of a cotton-growing area. Shanghai's eventual dominance over all the cities in China really began with the Treaty of Nanjing, which opened Shanghai to foreign trade in 1842. And these developments were really the beginning of Shanghai's emergence as a premier city. By the year 1910, Shanghai was 1.2 million people, then the largest city in China. Today it's the 2nd largest. So at least since 1840, however, Shanghai has been an anomaly. Its growth in population and national and international importance has paralleled the growth of similar cities in developing countries which grew under colonialism and have remained major cities of foreign contact. I'm thinking of cities like Bangkok, Seoul, Calcutta, Bombay, Manila, and even Yokohama. Shanghai's connections on most fronts were with the outside world more than they were with China. The physical structure of Shanghai, mainly with the downtown buildings built in the 1900s to the 1940s, they looked more European and more American than Chinese. Indeed, it was during the first decade of new communist China that the government saw Shanghai as having too strong a consumer orientation with ties to a capitalist economy. So here's another picture, another picture. But with the return to power of Deng Xiaoping in 1978 and his open door policy, Shanghai began returning to being an international finance and business center once again. And here's some more recent pictures. Here, these are beautiful pictures here of Shanghai. Here, these are quite nice pictures. I love Shanghai. In 1990, Pudong was acknowledged as a special development zone, and these actions of the government and the resulting foreign investments have energized Shanghai as an international trade and financial center. What I'm going to try to do is show how even though Shanghai is big and important internationally and nationally, it's not only because of the population size. This is a statement which I'm going to focus on a couple of times from a very famous demographer from University of North Carolina, Rupert Vance. He's died a long time ago. Any city with a large population is referred to as a metropolis, but it is well to point out that while all metropolises are large cities, not all large cities are metropolises. Population size is a concomitant, but function. The function is the key in determining the importance of a city. So what I'm going to do is focus on dominance. I'm going to measure for every one of the 171 cities how dominant it is compared to the other cities in the network, and then also local underpinning. So here's what I'm going to do for dominance. I have 5 measures of dominance: the number of industrial enterprises, value of industrial output, number of passengers, rail and air, freight, and postal value. These will reflect how dominant a city is compared to all the cities in the country, all the cities in the world, actually. Now, every city must also maintain an infrastructure to support its population in day-to-day activities. And to represent these, what I call local underpinnings, I have 3 measures dealing with retail value. Now, what do we do with these? We calculate a very simple statistic called the Z-score, which is the actual score, the score of the city on each measure minus the mean divided by the standard deviation. So we do this for every city 7 times for each of the 8 times for each of the 8 measures. A Z-score, they have interpretable mathematical properties. If you have a Z-score of 2, this means that city's score is 2 standard deviations higher than the average. If the city's score is 0, that means the city's score is average. So you take these scores for all of the different measures and you add them up. And Shanghai comes out to be the most important. Shanghai's total score is almost 72. And of the 171 cities, the city with the lowest score is Baoshan. Baoshan is a little place in Yunnan province, about 935,000 people. Of all 171 cities, Baoshan is the least dominant. Of all the 171 cities, Shanghai is the most dominant. So, for example, if you were to look at the scores for Baoshan and for, and I'm mixing up my pages here, excuse me. Here it is here. Oops. So here we have the different measures for Shanghai and the different measures for Baoshan. So for the industrial unit, the top one, Shanghai has a score of 7.7 and Baoshan has a score of 0.5. So on industrial units, Shanghai is 7.7 standard deviations bigger than the average. Baoshan is 1/2 standard deviation smaller than the average on industrial units. So we add those up together and we get a score of 72 for Shanghai and a score of almost 8 for Baoshan, to give you an idea of the range. So here are our results. We have 9 different categories, from a super metropolitan category where there are 2 cities, Shanghai and Beijing, all the way down to number 9, urban centers. So these are the 9 categories, and these are the number of cities in each of the categories. So let me now look at these. Here they are. Here's a map of them around China. So number 1 is the super metropolitan centers. These have overwhelming influence and dominance over all the cities of China, indeed over all the cities of the world, and that's Shanghai, Beijing. Then second, national metropolitan centers. These have influence and dominance mainly at the national level, Shenzhen, Tianjin, Chongqing, Guangzhou. Number 3, regional metropolitan centers. These exert dominance across provincial boundaries. Example, Chengdu and Hangzhou. Number 4, subdominant regional metropolitan centers. These have influence and control across provincial boundaries, but they're not as influential as the regional metropolitan centers. So examples would be Nanjing, Suzhou, Foshan. Number 5, provincial metropolitan centers. They have influence mainly within their provinces, and there are 10 cities, Xi'an, Changsha, Harbin. Number 6, urban centers with provincial influence. They have influence, but not as dominant as that of the cities in number 5. And there are 16 cities here, including Changchun, Fuzhou, Kunming. Number 7, urban centers with limited provincial influence. They have very minor influence within the province. And here there are 25 cities. Number 8, urban centers with limited sub-provincial influence. These cities mainly have influence at the precinct level or across or within the counties that are nearby. There are 83 cities, including Haikou, Lanzhou. And finally, then number 9, urban centers. They have little influence over other cities. These are the least influential of all the cities, and that includes Baoshan. Baoshan has the lowest of all 171 cities. So the first category just has the 2 cities, but within these 2, Shanghai has overwhelming influence over all the other cities, including Beijing. And empirically, this is indicated by Shanghai's high score of 72. Beijing's score is 62. So Shanghai is considerably more important from this ecological sense and demographic sense than is Beijing. Shanghai is a super metropolis. The other super metropolises in the world are New York, London, Tokyo, Delhi, Rio, Paris. Even though Delhi is 22 million people and Shanghai is less, Shanghai is more dominant. Even though Mexico City's 20 million people and Shanghai is less in size, it's much more dominant. So in this presentation, I've examined the patterns of dominance and subdominance of 101 largest cities in China, i.e. cities over 750,000. I've used the perspective of human ecology to study what I call the territorial division of labor. I analyzed the cities in terms of the way they organize their hinterlands and their levels of metropolitan dominance. So this has been an investigation of the urban hierarchy of China, and I've tried to show how Shanghai is by far the most important. Our data make evident the degree to which Shanghai is truly dominant on the two variables, for example, of industrial dominance, i.e. industrial enterprises and industrial output. Shanghai is significantly above all the other cities. Shanghai's Z-score on industrial units of 4.8 means that Shanghai's value is almost 5 standard deviations larger than the average city. The average of the value of postal services for Shanghai is almost 8 standard deviations above the average for all 171 cities. So it's no surprise to anybody here that Shanghai is the most dominant city in China, even around the world. But everybody's concluded that earlier, but most of these conclusions have been based on population size. This contribution, I think, goes beyond population size and tries to tell exactly why. What is it about Shanghai, other than its many million people, what is it about Shanghai that makes it so important? Population size is still very important, but there's more to city dominance than population size. Conventional wisdom thinks that a city's ranking with regard to the size of its population is the major indicator, and my research says it's not population size, it's these other issues. 6 decades ago, the human ecologist and demographer at the University of North Carolina, Rupert Vance, reported that there's much more to urban dominance than large size. Although city size is assumed to be a surrogate or a proxy indicator for functional dominance, my work in this project for this conference shows that the correspondence of the two is far from perfect. Rupert Vance, and I'm going to close my presentation with his quotation, quote, "Any city with a large population is usually referred to as a metropolis, but it may be well to point out that while all metropolises are large cities, not all large cities are metropolises. Population size is a concomitant and function is the keynote." And here's my university, Texas A&M, and my office. Thank you very much.